What were the final thoughts of Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker, right before he died in Luke's arms on the second Death Star? The novelization for the Star Wars films are always something that we like to reference when looking for deeper insights. Many times the novelizations give us extra details, pieces of dialogue, and usually entirely new scenes, and information on the unfolding events. However, the finest part about the books is how they can dive into the innermost thoughts of the individuals that we find, and in these archives, we love that. These thoughts often reveal important information about the opinions on the Force, or even other people that surround them, and that brings us to the topic of today's video, the death of Darth Vader, a solemn, quiet, appropriate passing. When we saw the removal of the Dark Lord's helmet, there was more room given to the shock of watching Luke gaze upon his father's damaged face for the first time. That moment is mostly about the closure of Luke and the reconciliation of Anakin. However, in the novelization for Return of the Jedi, we are granted a massively extended look into the mind of Vader, one where he takes his last breaths and thinks about his life. So what were the bittersweet final thoughts of the Chosen One? Well, today we're going to explore them. They were on the Death Star, Luke still weak, and burning from the barrage of Force lightning he took from the Emperor, dragging the dead-weighted suit of his father, Vader, collapsing under the weight. Luke barely makes it to one of the shuttles as the Death Star is about to go up in flames. Vader knows he isn't going to make it, so he decides to have one last moment with his son, looking upon him with his own eyes. Vader doesn't care about removing his mask, which will undoubtedly kill him. Sidious's lightning has already ensured his fate. Vader knew that on the day that he would destroy his master, the Lord of the Sith would be ready to pump his extra conductive armor full of Force lightning, and that his death was assured. In 20 years, Vader had still never figured out a way to this little problem, so when he saved his son, he knew he would certainly die. His respirator was completely fried, and all of his life support systems had since shorted out. They were rapidly shutting down, and so was his body. Vader knew that he wouldn't make it off of the Death Star before he finally embraced the death that had been so prolonged, a death that in his thoughts should have happened on Mustafar. But now, it was time to take off his mask, and the novel reads this. Luke was afraid to see his father as he really was, afraid to see what person could have become so dark, the same person who'd fathered Luke and Leia, afraid to know the Anakin Skywalker that lived inside Darth Vader. Vader too was afraid to let his son see him, to remove his armored mask that had been between them for so long, the black armored mask that had been his only means of existing for over 20 years. It had been his voice and his breath and his invisibility, his shield against all human contact. But now, he would have to remove it, for he would see his son before he died. Vader describes his mask as a shield against all humanity, and this is very true, for very few individuals ever saw Vader's true face and lived. Those who were unlucky enough to steal a glance at the damaged face of Vader would be quickly and swiftly killed. Such was the case with an Imperial officer, an obsessed nurse assistant, and a poor stormtrooper. All of them were in the wrong place and the wrong time. But once the helmet was lifted, Luke's own thoughts would reflect how Vader was truly feeling, and the novel continues. But when the mask was finally off and set aside, Luke gazed on his father's face. It was sad, the face of an old man, bald, beardless, with a mighty scar running from the top of his head to the back of his scalp. The man had unfocused, deep-set, dark eyes, and his skin was pasty white, for it had not seen the sun in 2 decades. The old man smiled weakly, tears glazing in his eyes, and now for a moment, he looked not too unlike Ben. It was a face full of meanings that Luke would forever recall upon. Regret. He saw mostly pain and shame. Memories could be seen flashing across it. Memories of rich times and horrors and love too. As Anakin Skywalker shined through for the first time, seeing the world with his own eyes instead of through the filtered red lenses of his helmet, all of his memories began flooding back. These are the first true feelings of Anakin Skywalker as he returns. He is filled with regret and shame. All of the Imperial comrades he killed for no reason, all of the innocent lives he took and tortured. The teenagers that had lives in front of them that Vader had snapped the necks of. The children that he had executed with his blade. The weight of it all was bearing down on him in this moment. But then he had a mixed bag of emotions, one where he began to remember his old life, as if waking from a terrible dream. Anakin Skywalker, reaching again, and it reads this. Vader saw his son crying, and knew it must have been at the horror of his face, the face that the boy now beheld. It intensified momentarily Vader's own sense of anguish to his crimes. Now he added guilt, and he imagined the repugnance of his appearance. This all brought him to the mind of the way he used to look, striking and grand, with a wry tilt to his brow that hinted of invincibility and took in all of the life with a wink. Yes, that was how he had looked once, and this memory brought a wave of other memories with it. Memories of brotherhood and home, his wife, the freedom of deep space, the memories of Obi-Wan his friend, and how that friendship was turned he knew not how, but got injected nonetheless. Injected with uncaring virulence that festered until hold. These were memories that he wanted none of now. Memories of molten lava crawling up his back. The boy had pulled him from that pit now, here, in this moment, with this single act. This boy was good. The boy was good, and the boy had come for him. So, if the boy was good, there must have been good in him too. He smiled up again at his son, and for the first time, loved him. For the first time in many long years, loved himself again as well. This is the moment where we see how much Vader has changed. Not only was he thinking about how he used to be, but his thoughts about Obi-Wan Kenobi, his brother, filled with an unbearable sadness for what had happened to their friendship, reliving the horrific tragedy. But he pushes those thoughts aside. He only has a few moments left. He had to let go of it and forgive himself. That was always Vader's biggest weakness, one that even Darth Sidious believed had held him back, his own self-loathing. Vader hated himself more than any Jedi, even Kenobi, and this stunted his growth not only as a Sith, but as a person. Anakin regretted Luke having to see him like this, and he wanted to make it right with his son. But as we continue to read, it wasn't just Obi-Wan that he thought of, but Yoda as well. And Vader decides to leave Luke with a quote from the Grand Master. The novel continues. With a little self-deprecatory smile, he shook his head at Luke, explaining away the unsightful beast that his son saw. Luminous beings are we, Luke, not this crude matter. Luke shook his head too, to tell his father that everything would be alright, to dismiss the old man's shame, to tell him nothing mattered now, and everything, but that he could not talk. Vader spoke again, even weaker, almost inaudible. Go, my son. Leave me. At that, Luke had found his voice. No, you're coming with me. I will not leave you here. I've got to save you. You already have, Luke, he whispered. He wished briefly he'd met Yoda to thank the old Jedi for the training that he'd given Luke. But perhaps he'd be with Yoda soon. Now, in the ethereal oneness of the Force, and with Obi-Wan, Anakin spends his last moments instructing Luke to tell his sister that he was right, that there was still good in him, and that Anakin had finally returned as he breathed his last. It is absolutely phenomenal to get inside the mind of Anakin Skywalker as he comes to the terms with his life as Vader, his inner being as he embraces the light side once more. In his last moment of life, Mustafar is still there, but it is fleeting. Instead, he is concerned with the friendship of his master, Obi-Wan, his master in Yoda, and the love for his son. He forgives them all, but more importantly, he forgives himself. And such is the nature of the light side of the Force. This is the nature that earned him the gift of passing on into the netherworld. Of everything that the Dark Lord had accomplished, his greatest feat was overcoming the dark side itself. This is what Star Wars is truly about. In the galaxy, people make mistakes, and sometimes they fall to the dark side. Selfishness, ambition, tragedy, and revenge. These make up the dark side. The dark side resides in every being. But the point is to understand, but while this is a part of everyone, the quick and easy path to give into, the way of the light is not weakness. One chooses to let go of these feelings or refrain from taking action in them. It's about having love, compassion, and forgiveness towards others for their weaknesses and for your own weaknesses. The Chosen One should have, by all accounts, been irredeemable for all of the monstrous things that he had done, all of the Jedi and friends that he had betrayed and even murdered, for an entire galaxy that was brought to darkness through his works. But it doesn't always have to be that way. He made a decision to destroy the darkness that kept him enslaved, and to be liberated from the shacks of hatred, and even self-loathing. His final thoughts show us that Vader knows exactly what he has done, and how it can never be reversed, but it can be atoned for, choosing to love instead of hate. This is the rebirth of Anakin. This is the moment where a monster is able to redeem himself through hope and love alone, and is why the Force continues to lend its power to a worthy Jedi, and why we continue to return to the galaxy far, far away. As always, my friends, thank you so much for everything, and may the Force be with you.